Good morning. My name is Esther Manheimer. I'm the mayor of the city of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the October 5th City Council Agenda Briefing Work Session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The live meeting will be streamed on the city's YouTube channel, accessed through the YouTube icon on the front page of the city's website, or via the live stream. The live meeting will be available on Charter Spectrum Channel 193. You may also listen to the meeting via phone at 855-925-2801 with meeting code 2967. And with all of our agenda briefing sessions, we do not take any public comment during the meeting. Council and staff, please unmute yourselves and say a quick hello when I call your name. Vice Mayor Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kim Roney.
Hello.
Councilwoman Maggie Ullman.
Hey, everybody.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Jamie Matthews. Assistant to the City Manager, I gave you a promotion, Jamie. Assistant to the City Manager Jamie Matthews.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor.
City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good morning.
City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Good morning.
And our Capital Projects Director Jade Dundas.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to the City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Thank you. And again, good morning. We have Ben Woody, has been introduced, Assistant City Manager, and he will review our business agenda. We are fortunate that we don't have a whole lot of items on that agenda, so we should get through that relatively quickly. But we do have a number of other items that are a part of our agenda briefing agenda and the other issues and updates that may take us a little bit of time. I would think that it will take up the majority of the time for our conversation this morning. We also, and I'm sure Ben will review this, but we also have a pretty busy day on Tuesday because we have a work session around our comprehensive capital facility study that starts at 3:30 and then the business meeting at 5. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Woody.
Thank you, Deborah. And again, good morning, Mayor, members of council. And I'm going to jump right into your agenda for October 10th. And as Deborah just alluded to, you're going to start your day early again. At 3:30, we'll have the work session on the comprehensive facilities study, and Jade and Walter Ear and Jade's team will be present that day along with consultants to give a really kind of first look at that study and really just an assessment of the facility. So it should be a good opportunity to really get familiar with the city's facility assets. 5 o'clock, we move into the formal meeting on Tuesday. You do have a relatively short agenda. One proclamation is scheduled under consent. We just have a few items actually, which is unusual, but they are important items. Item B, we've talked about at a previous agenda briefing, but that is some of the changes to the Asheville area riverfront redevelopment that focus on membership as well as the name of that body. Item C is an ordinance that brings our existing, it's an ordinance amendment that brings existing city ordinances into compliance with a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision, or actually a couple of decisions, by making technical changes to the Human Relations Commission membership makeup, by clarifying that equal opportunity to serve should be given to individuals or classes which have been historically disadvantaged. However, the change results in no racial characteristics being a requirement of that membership. Human Relations Commission took a look at this change at their September meeting, voted unanimously to recommend to council. It's actually going to be in front of the boards and commissions council committee earlier in the day, on October 10th. Real quickly, moving on, there's a question from Councilman Ullman. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's more just like a heads up for the council. I serve on the Civic Center Commission, and similar to the dialogue with the Asheville Buncombe Riverfront Commission, the Civic Center Commission is just kind of talking about, since there's been a reorg at the city, that the work that is led by the department is broader than just the Civic Center. So they're kind of looking at their charter and considering proposing to us some shifts in that. And I believe Janice Ashley and Chris Coral are stewarding that in the next, 30 to 90 days. But just a heads up that it's pretty sensible, seems kind of similar to this request where over time the need has evolved. So they're trying to suggest some strategy. So heads up for folks if you see that come across the committee's desk.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ullman. Moving on to item D, this is another ordinance amendment that's been initiated through our Human Relations Commission and Equity and Inclusion Department. This amendment is to the city's non-discrimination ordinance and incorporates additional language from the North Carolina Crown Act, and specifically to the current protections that prohibit discriminatory practices based on natural hair and hairstyles. So really gets some alignment between our existing ordinance with that recent act passed by the legislature. The Human Relations Commission took this up at their March meeting. They voted unanimously to recommend that council adopt what was termed as the Asheville Crown Act. Since that time, the Equity and Engagement Council Committee has taken this issue up, and based on guidance from our legal department, that committee voted unanimously to recommend a revision to our existing non-discrimination ordinance to include additional language regarding hair texture and examples of protected hairstyles, as well as that committee asked for staff to reach out to Buncombe County to consider amending their county non-discrimination ordinance with similar language, which I understand equity inclusion staff has reached out to the county on this issue. And moving on to our last consent agenda item is a resolution authorizing the manager to enter into a contract with a consultant to make some immediate repairs to parking garages. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you're going to get an update from Jay later in the agenda today, but this is an example of a contract that addresses an immediate need that was identified in the parking garage assessment that Jay's going to discuss a little bit later in this meeting. Any questions on the consent agenda? All right, I'm going to keep moving in record time so far. We have two items on the manager's report. One is an update on the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan. I'm sure council and the community has seen a number of efforts by that department to get out and have public engagement around this topic. So you'll have detail rail at the manager's report on Tuesday to give you kind of a deep dive on that effort and what's happened so far with that planning effort and where it's kind of moving towards. The other update we have is a public safety update, and that's going to be myself along with Deputy Chief Stepp. We're going to provide an update on some of the public safety efforts in the city with a focus on the downtown area. We're going to we are going to address concerns that we're hearing from the community, including levels of city service, updates on crime data, specific updates on policing and public safety efforts, cleanliness, nuisance enforcement, some of the things that are happening around supportive housing, community partnerships, and some forthcoming communication enhancements around downtown. So there'll be a lot of content to cover as part of that public safety update. Any questions on the manager's report items? Go ahead, Ronnie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was someone called? I couldn't tell. I'm really excited to hear those updates. Just one quick thing is Deputy Chief new, right? Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. That's
I-
great.
I actually going to add that, Sage, newly
Okay. Awesome.
promoted. Yes,
Have we
Yeah.
ever had a female deputy chief?
first time.
Ooh.
And we've got our first one's a great one. So we're real excited about that. And I'm actually happy to be doing this with Deputy Chief staff. So thank you. Councilwoman Rowe.
Yes, I'm aware that we need to focus on downtown as that is where we have a lot of daytime population. But I also want to make sure that we're acknowledging not just the downtown neighborhood, but the neighborhoods across the city. I think violence prevention is a need that we hear citywide and that we still have a lot of work ahead to address.
Thank you, Ms. Ronnie, for those comments, because that's exactly what we are going to do. The statistics and so forth that you will hear will be citywide. We will be focusing on downtown for a reason, because we think, percentage perspective, a lot of the unfortunate crime is actually happening in downtown. But yes, we don't ever want to message that we don't care or are attending to the issues related to public safety citywide. So yes, ma'am, we will be very cognizant of that as we give you and provide an update on public safety initiatives. And I just wanted to go back to the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan. That plan is actually being reviewed and ushered in the Environment and Safety Committee. But this was an opportunity for us, because we're focusing in on public engagement and public outreach, that we wanted to take it to full council to encourage participation and input in that planning process. So thanks. And yes,
Thank you,
we're
Deborah.
so proud of the appointment of Captain Stepp to Deputy Chief and are excited. That's all I can say.
As we do address the neighborhoods across the city that have concerns, I know that we have multiple facilities and services that are opening up. We've talked about the upcoming partnerships with Compass Point and the Ramada Inn opening, and Mission Health's behavioral health facility that's on the cusp of opening. However, if we don't have places for people to go that have deep need, we are seeing, and I'm certainly hearing, a lot of concerns, especially with the neighborhoods that are in close proximity around downtown when people are displaced. So I really hope that we can talk about the needs of the whole city while we are talking about downtown.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that feedback.
Any other questions on the manager's report items? Yes, thank you for the feedback. So next, I'm going to move to public hearings. We only have one scheduled for next week. And Allison, if you can pull up the image. It's a pretty straightforward request. This is a right-of-way closing. It's really just a portion, a triangular shaped portion that exists. And you can see this is the intersection of Craven Street, just off the bridge, and Hazel Mill Road. So we're really near the corner. New Belgium would be on the right side of the screen. You can't see it, but it's a little triangular shape of right of way there. The owner of the property on Hazel Mill Road petitioned to close this. It's associated with a level 2 development. It is 23 units within a multi-story building on this property. So the portion of the right-of-way that's requested for closure is not currently in use, nor is it maintained by the city. It doesn't impede any future transportation connections. And with that in mind, TRC did recommend unanimous approval of this closure. MMTC also at their August meeting recommended unanimous approval. And I'll stop there. And Councilwoman Roney.
Yeah, I guess I did have a concern that the property is not currently used as zoned, but it is very much currently in use. I walked down here and took some pictures the other day because there's now a permanent sign, a metal permanent sign on the edge that's pushing people into the road at that busy intersection, or they have to walk further into the private property. I don't think that's the intention of the metal sign that's announcing the closure of the right of way, but it's pretty intense. So I just wanted to make sure that while we're talking about the property not being used, we should be aware that it is being used, just not as it's meant to be. And part of that's because it doesn't have the infrastructure for so many people that are commuting to the nearby bus stop, multiple neighborhoods, and the Greenway.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, Councilman Roney, and I'll make sure that our transportation department's aware of that. Any other questions on this item? Okay, we'll move to new business, and I am going to hand it over to Rachel Wood to give an update on your first new business item related to multimodal transportation.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning, Mayor and Council. You may recall at our September 21st agenda briefing, we had a pretty robust dialogue around the College Patent Bike Lane project. Staff is working on the data requests that we received as a part of that agenda briefing, and we'll have those materials ready for Council in advance of next Tuesday's meeting. So just by way of quick reminder, the action that City Council is being asked to take this coming Tuesday is to consider the adoption of a resolution reaffirming support of multimodal transportation, and then more specifically, providing support for staff's continued work on the College Patent Bike Lane project. Since the September 21st agenda briefing, staff has made a presentation to the Downtown Commission. We have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with Sophie Dixon and WRES to talk about this project, as well as a few other efforts going on downtown. We've updated the website. We've provided email blasts to several different distribution lists under public input. And then I believe Ben also had an on-site meeting with the owners of Asheville Discount Pharmacy to provide a little more information on the project. So just wanted to give you some status updates on information that is new since the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago during your previous agenda briefing. Vice Mayor Kilgore.
I just have a couple of questions, Rachel, that I would like to hopefully have answered during that presentation. One of the questions I have is, are you all giving us a count when we talk about safety and crash and accident accounts? Are you going to include that just in the parameters of the path, the bicycle path area that we're planning on actually doing the correction? I'd like to know in that vicinity, how many crashes have actually occurred. You will give us that information?
We are going to provide that information, and then Councilmember Roney also requested the demographics of those individuals who were involved in those accidents, and we have that information prepared as well.
Okay, and you also have like the cause and effect. That was, I think, when Mike Lamb came to public, I think it was public safety. He was basically talking about, as far as the accidents that had occurred, the actual cause. I think he said something like 68% were sort of caused by substance, the type of substance. So I'm just wondering if that's going to be included too, to give us an idea as to the root cause of these accidents, as opposed to saying that it's, you know, the errors of because of the automobiles or, you know, that type of thing. So that will be included also?
Yes, we'll have that data prepared and provided to council prior to Tuesday's council meeting.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mosley.
Hey, I know we mentioned in a previous check-in that I guess police and fire did not indicate any opposition. Can I get any information about their assessment? Can I see their actual assessment? I'm particularly interested in police.
Sure. I think we've got several emails that we can provide as attachments to the materials that go out for the September 10th council meeting. So we can provide the documentation that we have.
Okay.
AFD.
Sorry. And one more data point. I'd be particularly interested in data from homeowners or businesses specifically on that corridor.
When you say data from homeowners and businesses, what specifically are you referencing?
So if you happen to live on Patton College, or if you have a business on Patton and College. I'd be interested how many are in support, how many are not.
We can provide the documentation that we have, where we have been able to summarize a lot of the feedback that we've received. The survey that was conducted did not specifically ask that question. And so unless we conducted another survey, I don't know that we're going to have something representative enough to, I think, get at the data or the results that I think you're wanting to see. We will.
Okay, so you never did specific outreach to the business owners to gather that info?
We've done a lot of specific outreach to business owners. What we haven't done is a survey strictly for the business owners in the close proximity to the project. And so we're not going to just have feedback from that subset. So we can provide you the survey data that we have by zip code, for example, and that is a part of the raw survey data that we've prepared already, but we're not going to have that subset specifically earmarked around which business owners and homeowners that live in the area, how they specifically responded, other than by zip code.
So I'm wondering, and this is probably far-fetched, is there a way to compile emails we've received from specific business owners, or who signed on to letters of support or against? Is there a way we can at least gather that info? Because I remember at the work session, but I don't know if they got to speak, there was one business owner in particular who said she had a letter, and I believe she said literally everyone around was against it. I don't know if that was just hyperbole or not. I'm just curious.
I think that was Patty Glazer.
Patty Glazer, yeah.
Understood. And a lot of that information was linked in the memo that was provided to council on September 19th, but we can provide that. And then I can work with the transportation team as well as our CAPE team to provide any other documentation that we have to make sure that council has that visible. I'll also note that one of the primary reasons for us deciding to have this council action was to have an opportunity for the public to provide comment at the council meeting. That's feedback that we received from several of the business owners, that while they've had an opportunity to speak at Downtown Commission, at the community meetings that we've had on the project, they wanted a specific opportunity to speak directly to the city council. And so there will be an opportunity for public comment on Tuesday evening for those individuals wishing to express their concerns or support of the project.
And the one thing I'd like to say also, this is just a comment. I live in West Asheville and I use the Patton Avenue coming into downtown all the time. The other day I was using it, and I know we're doing the road work on Carter and Ann. And what happened when I was coming that way, traffic was so bad that you could not actually, it would back up on the actual Patton Avenue highway part coming into downtown, just because of the road work there, because they, had it down to one lane. So I was just wanting to sort of point that out. I was just, that was actually shocking to me, but I just wanted to point that out. That was something I observed myself.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And we can certainly provide some details on when that project will be wrapping up and talk about how that is being coordinated in context of this potential project moving forward, just to talk about how we're going to ensure that there won't be conflicts with those two projects.
It's not that I was worried about the conflict. I was just worried about that actually had one lane instead of two lanes, and that was happening because of that. So if we're actually down to one lane, I was just sort of just giving that example that may be something we may need to consider.
Understood. Thank you. Councilmember Turner.
Just real quick, I think I mentioned this in an email to staff too earlier. I was expecting some of the language around all modes to be kind of concurrent with this, and I understand we have some work to do in developing that. However, I was kind of looking at the sample motion that is included, and I wonder if we might talk about this now instead of Tuesday to potentially expand the language. Right now, it's a motion to do ... authorize the city manager to authorize staff to move forward with the College Patton bike lane project. end quote. And I'm suggesting that we add the language and ordinance updates regarding all modes of transportation, end quote, just that simple language, meaning that since what we're effectively doing is being asked to nod at, whether or not to move forward on this, to do the funding, the bidding, all of it. And since I think there's support, and maybe this is the best time to, ask that, to also look at all modes and those ordinances. And since Brad has already drafted them and kind of given us some awareness of what that might look like, I think that we should have that conversation as well at this time, even if it's just to say, we know there's more work to do, but, we're also nodding at, we are interested in all modes.
Yeah, I would support that as well. Thank you, Sage.
Thanks, Kim.
I was thinking Brad already put that in there, or no?
I don't think so. We've talked about maybe bringing it up today, so it could be more of a conversation. It would be great to link those updates that we saw, the ordinance as is and what it might look like, to this document somewhere. So it's so extensive. I'm not sure anybody will be able to find it, but it would be helpful.
And so Sage, the sentiment is like, because the ordinance update itself is pretty technical, it's going to take some time for staff to get something that can really hold water. We need time to do that. And so it's not saying like we're going to adopt that ordinance because we need to see that in the future, but it's saying, hey, staff, we're signaling we really want these to go together because it helps create the bigger picture. And then we'll revisit it in the technical later this year. That makes a lot of sense. And I like that idea.
Concurrently sounds good because it sounds like we're not going to do any of the striping or rework until the spring anyways. So, when we stripe it, maybe it's ready for all modes. That could be our similar timeline.
Okay.
Hey, a point of clarification. Sandra just asked this question where she was talking about, or she's making the comment about Patton Avenue being down to one lane down near the Ann Street intersection where they're doing utility work. And based on the way you phrased that comment, Sandra, it made me think that you're under the impression that this bike lane project would reduce Patton Avenue to one lane in that area. You're on mute.
No, moving into that area. I was just sort of just giving that an example as to what one lane does to traffic. So we should be mindful as.
Oh, okay. I thought you thought it was going to make that area one lane.
I was just talking about.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yes, I got you. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you for the feedback. We'll continue to work on preparing the follow-up materials. And again, we'll get that information to you as soon as it's ready in advance of Tuesday's council meeting.
And Rachel, let me make sure that we've gotten direction in terms of how to revise I don't know if it's the resolution or the action that is requested.
I think it's, if I understand it correctly, and please, if Councilmember Turner or Brad, correct me if I've misunderstood, we're going to amend the motion. So the motion would include direction for staff to continue working on the ordinances that would be revised and ultimately go to Multimodal Transportation Commission, Planning and Economic Development Committee, and then come forward to full council for consideration. And to Councilmember Turner's point, that could all happen this winter prior to ultimately the work on the bike lane proceeding should City Council approve the resolution endorsing staff to continue that work. So my understanding is it's just an amendment to the motion, not to the resolution itself.
Well, and I haven't
Not
read
even
the
an
whole
amendment.
resolution.
It's not an amendment. It's just redoing the motion.
Rewriting
So that
the motion, yes, yes.
But do you want the wording, Sage, in the resolution itself? That's sort of more of a commitment
I
language. That's
would
what I
think
thought.
So. I would think so. I haven't read the whole resolution yet. I will. But I would.
Is
think
there
so.
a way to do that, Brad, just to incorporate some language that just, so that we're on the record as committing to a process that will eventually lead, I mean, we recognize we're not amending the ordinance by making this commitment, but we're just signaling the commitment to a later decision around the ordinance change.
Yes,
Nod
Mayor,
your
I think
head,
that's
yes.
very doable. We can add very similar, it won't remove or alter the language that's in there currently as proposed. It will simply add to both the motion and the resolution to include this particular direction to move forward with the direction of coming back to you with those proposed ordinance amendments.
Yeah.
And Sage, I appreciate the effort to try to time it with the restriping. Although if we were to do this, I'm not sure that the striping would be different. And if it would be different, then we'd have to go redo all of our bike lanes all over the city. Yeah,
It's
I
not
don't think we
different.
need, yeah,
It's
it's
not
not different. That's okay. Phew,
Yeah.
I was trying to think of cities where I've seen, it didn't look any different to me, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
but
was
if
going to
it's
say.
like the universal symbol for all modes or
Yep.
something. Right?
Yep.
Yes. It just makes sense to me if we're gonna, I've been on the fence with this one. I've been hearing from the businesses and, I think the other councilwoman's points about who in that specific corridor has supported or not. And, it's been a tough one. And I feel like I have talked with a lot of folks directly. And at the end of the day, it's coming down to a principle of you do want a bike lane or you don't want a bike lane. And there's not any more discussion I can have. So I feel compelled to move forward in a way, in some step that allows staff to keep moving. But I do still feel compelled that a complete street has more than just a bike lane. So, I think the timing is important. Like if we were going to take this step and invest in it and say we're going to do this downtown, then let's do it for all modes. That's why I suggest concurrent. But you're right, the striping isn't any different. Thanks, everybody.
Right. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay,
Hey, Ben.
I'm gonna start moving again. So the last item on your council agenda is boards and commissions appointments, and I'm gonna cover that briefly as part of the boards and commission council committee overview. So with that, we will move to council committee business items next. And I'm gonna jump right in because Planning and Economic Development Committee is the first one. Councilwoman Turner.
I was just going to comment, like you, it's very short. So I had a suggestion. Go ahead.
For PED, we have one item on that agenda. You PED members, you will have busier agendas in November and December potentially, but our item on the October PED is an update on implementation efforts associated with the GAP plan, which council recently adopted, and we'll have Lucy Crown there to give an overview of kind of where things stand in terms of implementation and some of the things that we want to work towards accomplishing in the rest of the fiscal year. And so I'll stop there, take any questions, and I think Deborah will have the next committee review.
Ben, I was just going to suggest to my other committee members that maybe since it's a short agenda, we could add another item. One that came to mind was there was a recent request from Councilwoman to understand what's happening with STRs and enforcement and such, and the ordinances around. And we received a great update. It was very helpful. But I'm wondering if we should maybe consider adding it to this agenda or a future agenda as an item if PED is the right place. Since this is short, I thought this might be a spot. I guess it's up to the chair and.
I can get with Sandra on that, but more importantly, let me get with the staff. And I know we have asked them to pull together information so they can give PED an update. So I'll just see where they're at on that. So I'll do the best I can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. So the Policy, Finance, and Human Resources Committee meet on the 10th at 10 o'clock. And there are a number of items, and actually this agenda is almost a carryover from our last meeting in September. We had so many items. Well, we had one item that took up a lot of time, and so we weren't able to get to the other items. So there's only one item on the agenda that is actually asking for action. So we will have an update from the Chief Financial Officer, Tony McDowell. He's going to update us on the 2023 year-end audit and the first quarter fiscal year budget report. And again, that's for information only. The next item would be the fiscal year 2025 capital improvement program process and 2024 GO bond planning update. And again, that's an overview of the process and the timeline. We are trying to provide you all with as much pre-planning, as much information about capital needs, both from a broader community perspective and infrastructure perspective, but also with regards to our assets, our facility needs. And again, you will be getting information about that, more about that at the work session. And then how do we launch and get prepared for the GO bond? And the work that staff is doing to help, again, provide you all with as much information to make informed decisions. Yes, Ms. Roney.
About the streeteries that are on our agenda, I am curious. We have had requests from food truck operators and owners, and I wonder if, while we're talking about businesses being able to use the public right of way, while we also have really big concerns about ADA compliance and our GAP plan, because there's so much competition for our public right of way and using it for profit, what would it look like for us to start a conversation about piloting, allowing food trucks specifically to target a positive impact on our MWBE goals for minority and women-owned businesses? I don't know if that's a conversation that we could come to, like a recommendation at Policy and Finance just yet, but I think it's a window we could prop open.
Well, it's definitely something that we can look into. I'm not sure.
Let me just say, as probably the only person here besides Maggie that was around during the food truck beginnings, but and maybe Shanika was, it was a pretty significant undertaking to get to where we are right now with our food truck regs. So, I think, well, I totally think the intention is laudable. I just worry about the load you all are taking on and the number of requests you're getting in this meeting, and just remembering how much work that took. So, the only way I know how to facilitate a single council member's request for something significant like this is to just talk to each other and figure out if there's a committee that would be willing to take on the work, assuming that it's a priority and given the staff limitations. So I'm not trying to like crush the dreams and hopes. I'm just trying to give you a little piece of how much time it took to do it last time. So
right, and things have changed since last time because of COVID and because of our goals around equity. I wonder if my suggestion would be that this would be the committee that would take it up. So I didn't want anyone to be surprised that I'm asking for it to be part of the work plan of this. It
would definitely be PED, which is where it went last time. It is not Policy and Finance, because it is. So anyway, we can talk about it more. I'm just concerned that there's not. I don't disagree with the initiative or the concept at all. I'm just concerned that we're going to be putting aside some of the other things we're trying to get done right now.
Mayor, that's exactly where I was going to head, that we need to look at what our work program is now, and see if staff has capacity to even think about this. But I can affirm what the mayor talked about, because I was integrally involved in the food truck ordinance in Charlotte, and it was a heavy lift. And it really takes a lot of time and assessment and analysis.
I would give an offering here. Jamie and I were talking about trying to get the retreat scheduled and being sort of timely with that this year. And we're looking at a date. I think we're going to be looking at dates as early as January. So it might be an opportunity to bring up some of these more significant concepts would be. Oh, Maggie's. I
appreciate that. And I think that, it may just be a challenge for me to support public use of the right of way for businesses that have the capital to have a building versus a truck. That's where I'm at. So I appreciate the capacity conversation and the conversation here today.
And I would like to add, Mayor, as part of the discussion, we really do need to have a more consistent and standard way that we refer things to council committees, or even decide how things get to committee. And then once it's in committee, even the dialogue and the discussion at the committee level, how granular should that discussion be as well. So I am trying to keep
I mean, I'm trying to keep my eye on what constitutes a request for information, which is, individual council members can request information. Now,
Absolutely.
some of it can be so onerous that it might merit a discussion more broadly amongst council members, whether it's supported by a majority of the council members. But otherwise, for example, this initiative that Sage was working with on the all modes of transportation, she worked, to get everyone to generate some support for it and then bring it to a meeting like this where we can make sure majority support moving forward with that undertaking. So trying to at least follow, there's not a standard practice necessarily, and that is challenging.
I have a question. I have another comment, but in response to this, I'll add, this came up on the kind of list of options and things we could be doing to bolster activity in downtown. The food trucks was something I heard. And I don't know how much background everybody has. Just real quick, it used to be easier in downtown. A couple things made it harder and then made it harder throughout the city. The first was that we disallowed generators, which that didn't kill food trucks. It just meant they had to wire them differently, have a panel on board that could connect to a 110. And so then we had businesses that were able to park them into a wall. I know because we did it. And then there was another step that reduced it to a permitted set of outlets that were wired a certain way in certain areas in downtown, kind of like we did to hotels. Right? We gave them really restrictions, put them in separate areas. That just kind of dismantled the late night scene, the ability for someone to pull up in a parking lot, plug in. It's just different. I wonder if the littlest tweaks to even take 2 steps backwards and not open the whole thing up that takes 6 months or a year of input might be an opportunity to get closer to what Kim is trying to get to. But so in that vein, if it were something small and not going to give staff a heart attack of responsibilities, I would be interested in looking at those kind of little things. But that's just going back to what we used to do, not reinventing the wheel. So just that input. My other comment was, since this committee is going to be looking at the GEO bond planning update, that's wonderful. Will that come to council? Or should I watch that meeting?
I would highly encourage you to watch the meeting, but
Okay.
if there is a need for it to come to full council.
So it's not planning to, okay.
It's
So that's
not on
fine.
that path as of yet. However,
Okay.
there will be a work session, I think in December, Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. And Maggie, yep. So you will get it and definitely get more information in December as well.
Great. Thank
Full
you.
work session. Absolutely. All right, so we've already discussed the outdoor dining ordinance update. We'll probably go into a little bit more detail about the scope of what those ordinance changes are being recommended. And then the work plan development, and that is for information only. And the action item, again, was the update on the ordinance. And if you all want to defer or delay that, that will be a committee discussion. All right, that's all I have we have for that committee. Boards and commissions, Dan?
Yep. Okay. I'm going to keep moving. Boards and commissions. We have 4 agenda items. One is that committee will be holding 3, and I think now it's going to be 2 because I believe one candidate's not able to make it. So they'll be holding 2 interviews for the remaining planning and zoning seats. There are 2 seats available for appointment. Those appointments will actually occur at the council meeting. And of course, I would encourage council members not on the boards and commissions committee to try and take a look at those interviews prior to the council meeting. We will have, as I mentioned, 3 interviews. I'm sorry. Thank you, Sarah. You're ahead of me as usual. So we have 3 interviews and it's the 4th that could not attend. So moving on, we talked about this a little bit earlier during consent, but Equity and Inclusion Department and Legal will provide an overview of the proposed changes to the membership language for the Human Relations Commission. That'll come to full council later that day on the regular business agenda meeting. The other item we have is 26 possible appointment recommendations to be made. I think Sarah and Maggie's team will go into more detail, but I do think that we've made some changes to the frequency that we make the appointments, and we're trying to do a better job of getting a deeper and more diverse pool of applicants for these seats. I think we're seeing some progress in the efforts of the clerk's office. So you'll have a lot of appointments to make at that meeting, boards and committee. And of course, those will come to full council later in the evening. And the last item is Sarah Gross is going to give a presentation and discussion on the boards and commissions committee FY24 work plan. So I know we're all excited to see Sarah provide that information and overview. Any questions on boards and commissions committee? Okay, then I think we are going to turn it over to Rachel Wood for the next committee overview. So Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ben. So October is a busy month for the Equity and Engagement Committee. We are actually having 2 meetings. The first is on October 13th, which is a Friday. This is a special called meeting. There is only one item on the agenda, and that is discussion on the remaining $50,000 in strategic partnership grant funds that are available from the summer 2022 pilot program. We had a good dialogue with the committee at their September 19th meeting, got some feedback and some data requests. So we will provide the requested data several days in advance of the meeting next Friday, and then hope to receive some direction from this committee regarding how you want that $50,000 allocated. Following a recommendation from the committee, then the City Council will be asked to vote to approve that reallocation of those $50,000. Later this fall, there will be discussion on next steps for our standard process that we do hope to move up a few months for the strategic partnership grant funds. This discussion on the 13th is solely discussing how we're going to reallocate the $50,000 remaining from the pilot program. Councilmember Roney.
Thank you, Rachel. Can you confirm that we're going to, with the agenda that's going to go out for that specially called meeting, be able to have linked the information that was requested around the rubric and the previous applicants and their applications can be linked and things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to have all of that linked. And again, we're going to try to get that out very early next week so that you have ample time to review those materials prior to the meeting on Friday.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so next we'll move to October 17th. The Housing and Community Development Committee has a couple of pretty meaty items on the agenda. First will be an overview of community development block grant eligible uses. You may recall at the September 21st agenda briefing, we had a pretty detailed discussion regarding how the remaining $300,000 that needs to be obligated and fully spent by April 2024 could be used. So our new Community Development Division Manager, Dennis Newbern, is going to provide a detailed overview, just a reminder on eligible uses, categories, percentages of CDBG funds that can be spent within those categories, and then to speak more specifically on the thought process behind staff's recommendation to reallocate that $300,000. I'm sure Ben's going to mention this whenever we do the 8-week overview, but we have postponed that public hearing to October 24th. The public hearing item is an amendment to our annual CDBG plan. And the thought process behind that postponement was so that we could have this more detailed conversation with HCD members, get your feedback heading into that public hearing later in the month. Next on the agenda, I'm sorry?
Just going to say thank you for those efforts.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and Dennis is such a great resource. He has encyclopedic knowledge of all things HUD, so we're really lucky to have him on our team, and I know I learn from him every time I meet with him. Moving on with the HCD agenda, Emily Ball is going to provide an update on Code Purple funding. As a quick reminder, city and county both fund $50,000 a year for Code Purple. So this will be an overview of that recommendation. That recommendation will then be brought to full city council for consideration. And last on HCD agenda is a review of a land use incentive grant for 115 Fairview Road, which is a 281 unit apartment or multifamily project. Also on October 17th, we have our second Equity and Engagement Committee meeting. We will have our standard standing reparations and stop the harm audit update from Brenda Mills. She'll be providing a recap of discussions that occur at the October 16th Reparations Commission meeting, as well as some details associated with the summit that is currently underway. Quick reminder that we do have the summit this Saturday at UNC Asheville. And then the majority of the time for the October 17th EEC meeting will be spent with Miller 3, who is our disparity study consultant. As a part of that presentation, the committee will be asked to recommend that the City Council formally accept the report, continue the city's race and gender conscious contracting policy, and recommend the development of an implementation plan. So we'll be asking for feedback. We'll be requesting a recommendation from the committee before it goes to full council. The report will be delivered to full council at their October 24th meeting. And that is all I have for equity and engagement in housing and community development.
Okay, moving along. Next up is the review of the 8-week agenda. I'm going to take a few minutes just to highlight a couple of items. Unfortunately, as you know, Rachel and I alternate these reviews, and so Rachel will have the next review, and there's a lot of information on that agenda, because I guess you have a short one, you end up having a long one oftentimes the next meeting. So I'm going to focus on October 24th. There's a number of consent agenda items on that, but what I really want to spend time on is the public hearing items. You have 5 public hearing items scheduled for that meeting, as well as acceptance of the disparity study recommendations. So first, South Slope Vision Plan is still on track, hopefully, to be in front of council at the October 24th meeting. Last I heard, it was moving forward in a positive direction. So again, we hope to have that plan to you for adoption at that meeting. The next 2 public hearing items are a little bit different, and I want to just point your attention to these. We have 2 UDO wording amendments. One is for some changes to our current cottage development standards, and that's to try to make cottage development a little more accessible. And the other is the amendment to the city's flag lot standards. And what that would do is allow a little more ease of the creation of flag lots. And so that would, have the impacts of creating additional density in areas throughout the city. And so what makes those a little bit unique is both those amendments were initiated by a citizen, by a resident. So don't see that a lot in Asheville. Typically, the wording amendments come to you via either your direction or they're initiated by staff. This is one that was initiated by a local builder and developer, and staff, of course, has worked with that person throughout. So hoping we get this to you in a manner that, for the most part, there's some consensus between staff and the applicant on those text amendments. The other public hearing item is the CDBG annual action plan, which Rachel covered that, the amendment to that, and Rachel covered that a little bit as part of her update. Want to pull your attention also to McCormick Field. You probably see the conditional zoning request for McCormick Field on the agenda as tentative. There's the staff that's moving that through the process have been doing the neighborhood meetings and working with the adjoining neighborhoods on what that request is. And really what it does is it rezones McCormick Field to allow for that to continue to move forward for the renovations that are planned. A little bit of background on that. Typically, when you have a certain financial investment in properties, it triggers changes to the site. And so the conditional zoning is intended to deal with some of those required changes and minimize any impact that would have on the adjoining neighborhood. So again, that's tentatively scheduled for October 24th. And finally, as Rachel mentioned, you'll have a new business item to accept the disparity study recommendations. We'll also have the consultant at that council meeting to provide that presentation and recommendations. Any other items on the 8-week agenda that council would like to cover? Okay, you'll have a busy meeting at your next meeting. So with that, Deborah, I'm going to move to other issues and updates and really turn that over to you to kick off.
Sure, thank you. We told you that earlier that this will probably take up the bulk of our time. We have an agenda item. We'll start with the first one, the parking garage assessment. Item E, I believe, on your agenda for Tuesday to address some fairly critical and priority improvements that are needed for the parking garages, I should say. There is a memo attached as well as a listing of some ADA locations that is attached to your agenda. And as I stated earlier, we are trying to give you all as much information as possible about our capital needs, both from, again, a facilities perspective, but also public and city infrastructure. We have needs, y'all. We've got a lot of needs. And with this parking garage, we thought that it would be appropriate for us to go into a little bit more detail specifically about this one, because we've had people to come to council meetings, particularly mentioning the inadequacy of some of the ADA infrastructure that exists. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jade, who's going to give you a preview of the assessment, as well as more detail about the action that's requested in terms of the priority and our critical needs. So Jade, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. Jade Dundas, Capital Projects Director. Thank you for the time, Mayor, members of council. Really just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that were included in the memo. Really, this does represent, as Deborah had said, a critical infrastructure for us. And this is a study that we did, and the results of this study suggest that we need to make some investments in this. And so we started the work with Walker Consultants. They're a national expert on parking structures in January. And I want to highlight that just because it's kind of record pace for us to be able to get through something this deep and this big of an assessment in that time frame. And what it did was it really listed prioritized our needs in these garages. The assessment looked at the conditions of the facilities. It looked at utilization of the facilities, and then also ADA assessment and recommended improvements. It prioritized the need for the improvements, and we have already completed one round of immediate improvements. They really categorized like the condition and the structure improvements in immediate needs, high level needs, and medium level needs. There is a low level need, but that low level need just refers to like the routine maintenance associated with maintaining these parking structures. Immediate needs, like I said, we went through. There was what we considered, what was recommended by the design firm that had like an emergency need, and so we had, for example, Wall Street. The stairwell had like structural, the pieces of steel that connect the actual treads of the stairs to the stringer, they were deteriorated. And so that was an immediate need that we needed to get in there and cut those out and make those safe. So we've done one phase of immediate work. The council item that you're asked, or the action item that you're being asked to approve on next Tuesday, is like the second phase of those immediate needs. They were less of an emergency nature, so we had some time to work on those and bid them out. Get any design work that we needed to. So that's this is a contract for the construction of those items. And then to look forward, we are the next round of improvements we will make associated with ADA work. Critically important, very important for us to be able to put those in place. There will be a little bit of design work on that. Staff is working to get all of those things in place so we can shoot for a goal of having all those improvements, those recommendations in place by January of 2024. That's the goal. then the high level and the medium priority needs will require some additional design. This is a lot of catch up. This feels, even for staff, this feels like a lot of work compressed into a very small, kind of broken up way, but it really does represent a lot of catch up for us. And so the high and medium needs will be implemented in the spring. We are consider the full report is being looked at. This does deal with structures that the public uses. We're very cognizant of the of how critical these structures are and the safety sensitivity associated with reporting out like any kind of vulnerabilities that might exist on any of our structures. And so the report is being reviewed right now. The intent is to produce that report on the website, city website, when it has been completed, when the review is completed. And then just kind of a preview of how we're going to continue to address this. Deborah had mentioned that this is a budget impact. It's an immediate, fairly substantial budget impact, but it would also, like the other messaging that we'll be giving on our capital updates, is that we really need to start investing in our facilities on a routine basis, and that means a higher annual budget for those. And so that the parking garages have the same assessment when it's all said and done. And you'll be hearing about those over the next several months through our capital preparation and submission. So that's the high level summary of those. Happy to answer any questions. Ms. Turner?
I just have one lingering question. I think, I don't know if it's in 5, 6, 7 years. At some point, what we now call the Harris deck was going to have a digital counting timer placed up at the road because it's a congestive issue. We went through all the hurdles, the right of ways, the county had to vote on it and allow it, the electrical, we got it all bid out, design, it had to be wind worthy. It was a huge process and it never happened. I'm bringing it up because I'm hoping as we reinvest in these decks and bring them up to standard, that is part of the conversation. It's just sitting there ready, waiting for us to do it. And it does actually create a lot of backlog in downtown because that particular deck access, that little road, you can't do anything except wait 20 cars deep to get out. So just sharing that. Also, has the stuff changed these days? These little treads on the decks, are we getting a product that say is more moisture resistant? I know that's in the weeds, but like we're making those long-term calls, right?
Yeah, yes, actually, great question. I appreciate it. I'll convey the digital signage to transportation. So we'll follow up on that. But it is the maintenance question is a really great question because I do believe that becomes part of our routine maintenance. So the best way to maintain a steel structure is to make sure that it's properly coated. And when there's the paint has deteriorated, you need to strip that paint off and repaint it. And so being able to incorporate those type of maintenance activities is an important part of our that future routine for us.
Thank you. It's going to be a big one.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all.
All right. If there are no further questions, we'll quickly move to the last item on our agenda, which is the City Council priorities and organizational work plan. I hope that you all have noticed a little bit more structure as it relates to items that are coming to the committees, and in particular, the work that is being assigned to our advisory boards and commissions, that we are having a much stronger alignment between what council has identified as priorities, what staff is identifying as priorities, and what the boards and commissions are working on. So we think that we are seeing, again, a lot more alignment, a lot more work to do, we granted. But this particular item is in reference to, you may recall as part of your retreat this past March, we were talking about your priorities and then talked about an organizational work plan. And we pulled out a spreadsheet that had about 50 something items on it. and it may have been 70, I can't even remember, but it was a lot. And you all said, I didn't know you guys were working on all these things. Who told you when? And so we are trying to close that gap, particularly in terms of communication, so that we all have an idea of, here are the things from an organizational perspective that are must-dos for this year, and potentially could extend into another year. But these are the things that we are agreeing to work on as you all are defining the what, which is your priorities and your goals. And then we are coming back with you with proposals and projects and potentially programs that we think respond to and help address and meet the needs of the items that you all have identified in terms of your strategic priorities. And so what Rachel and Ben are going to do is to kind of hopefully demonstrate in these, I believe the matrix or the spreadsheet was attached that identified 2 categories. One, policy items that we are working on that will be definitely going to committees and potentially going to full council for some type of action. And then the second piece is operational. It's just kind of those day-to-day kind of things that we are working on an administrative level that may come to a council committee for information, but may not necessarily need any kind of council action. Like there may be action that you've taken, like funding for our human resources software that we're doing. We put that as a priority because we need to work on that so that we are able to better understand our workforce, what our workforce is being paid, who's being promoted, and all of those kinds of things. So again, Rachel and Ben are going to provide you with the detailed presentation that hopefully make all of the stuff that I just said randomly make sense. So I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Rachel, you're going to kick us off, and then Ben, you that clean up. All right.
Thank you, Deborah and Allison. If you don't mind, we can go ahead and pull up the slides. As Deborah mentioned, we're very much a work in progress, but we're making some really exciting progress as we continue to refine the different strategic planning elements that we have as a city, knit those together, and more intentionally communicate back with the council as well as the general public the status of the work that we're doing, ultimately aligned with city council strategic priorities. I'll also note that I just got back from the International City County Managers Association conference in Austin and got a lot of really great ideas. I was affirmed that we're in a really good place, and a lot of other cities across the country are in the same place we are in terms of trying to refine our strategic planning process, but also was able to get some best practice ideas that I'm very excited about. I haven't had a chance to debrief with Deborah, Ben, and Jamie on those yet, but I think there's some really great tools out there that we can work on to make this process even better. So next slide, please, Allison. By way of quick reminder, the City Council's vision is multi-year and aspirational in nature. It serves as a guidepost both for staff as well as City Council on how we deliver services to the community. Your strategic priorities establish key areas of focus for a specific year. So just a quick reminder, your vision is multi-year, and then your strategic priorities are reviewed on an annual fiscal year basis. At your retreat in March, you maintained the 6 previous strategic priorities, and at that time, you also drafted 70 statements related to those priorities. Through work over the course of the spring, culminating in a work session on June 13th, the City Council took those 70 statements and distilled them down into a single goal statement for each strategic priority area to provide clarity to the community, council, as well as staff on the intended outcomes and impacts related to your strategic priorities that you wanted focused on for the fiscal year. Those goal statements were affirmed by council at the June 22nd agenda briefing. And since that time, staff has been working at the council committee level, as well as at the organizational level, on making sure our projects for our organizational work plan and council committee work plans are aligned with those strategic priority goal statements and the broader strategic priorities that council has established. Annual work plans are intended to be dynamic, living documents that serve as tools to plan for, better organize, and enhance our reporting on the work that is underway, ultimately to move the needle in achieving those impacts that City Council wants established through your strategic priorities. Next slide, please. So this is a new visual. Thank you, Dan and the CAPE team who created this. And the intent behind this visual is to show the cascading effect between the different strategic priority and strategic planning elements that the City Council has established. So again, those broad multi-year vision framework areas, you have 8. Those are intended to be multi-year in nature and are then further refined and specified on an annual basis via council's strategic priorities, which again, you look at every year during your retreats. And then the new element that I just referenced in the key takeaways are those strategic priority goals that get a little bit more specific in what you want to see staff focus on over the course of a fiscal year to ultimately achieve those desired outcomes from your strategic priority goals. Next slide, please. And then you've seen this slide before. This slide is a little bit more focused on the tools. So the vision framework, strategic priorities, and strategic priority goal statements all help to define the intended outcomes and impacts that the City Council wants to see. And then the work plan, starting with the council committee work plans, that really focuses more on the how. And we get more specific on the how as we drill down from the council committee work plans to the organizational work plan. Deborah referenced that we're doing more intentional work with the advisory boards on making sure their work is aligned with council strategic priorities and the council committee work plans. And that at a more granular level, making sure we're tying the projects that individual departments are working on back to council strategic priorities and that vision framework. So this is just another way to depict how we're operationalizing the work that is required to ultimately achieve those intended outcomes in council strategic priorities and the new goal statements. Next slide. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Ben for this one, or am I covering this one?
I can take it from here, Rachel. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Good afternoon again. I think we went from morning to afternoon. This is just an overview of your priority goal statements. That's what council developed during the work session. And I actually want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Allison. So I'm going to take a few minutes just to really work through kind of what the alignment actually looks like. So on the city's organizational work plan, we have currently a total of 49 projects. And of course, you can see those in the spreadsheet that was attached as a PDF to your agenda briefing agenda. The 49 current projects, that number can change through the course of a year. There'll be things that will be completed at times, typically during the budget process, but there are projects that are also added. But as of today, right now, we have 49 total work plan projects. And what we have done is for this presentation, we've organized those into 2 categories, as Deborah mentioned. We have a category of policy level projects, and then we have a category of kind of what I would say is operational level projects or things that have been operationalized. And just to further give a breakdown of that, 26 of the 49 current projects on the organizational work plan are policy level work plan projects. So those 26, and I'm going to show you those 26 on the next 6 slides. Those are projects that still require perhaps council action or some form of involvement by the full council. So these are things that are actively being worked on that council has a touch point on. The last slide, the 7th slide I'm going to cover is going to be the remaining 23 work plan projects that are operational projects. And those are things that are really happening at the department level or at some sort of implementation to move forward a council priority. So just to orient you to the first slide, this is one of your strategic priority areas, equitable and affordable housing and stability. You can see the priority Next, you can see the strategic priority goal. That's the goal statement that council created earlier this year. Next, you can see where there's council committee alignment. So typically within this strategic priority area, these are the two council committees that are going to see most of these projects or weigh in on them in some form or fashion. Doesn't mean there aren't other council committees at times that will be involved in some of these projects, but this is just a general alignment. And so for this particular strategic priority area, you can see the three, and this is 3 of the 26 policy work plan projects that are currently active. Affordable housing updates, including review of tools, the missing middle housing study, which I know we've been to PED once already to discuss that. And then another item that's on the PED work plan as an example is the disposition of city-owned land. And that's really just starting as an example, and that is on the PED work plan. And I don't remember if that's November or December, but that is an item that will be in front of PED in the very near future. So this is just a good example of kind of how we've oriented the work plan items. So I'll just stop for a second. And any questions on the slide structure, the alignment, what this looks like? Good. I'm gonna take that as Jamie did a great job putting this together. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read all these to you, but I just want to touch on each. So this is our next priority, strategic priority area, homelessness strategies. Again, you can see the priority, the goal statement, the council committee alignment, and our primary policy level work plan project on this is implementation of the National Alliance in Homelessness recommendations. Next slide.
We may want to also add that, you know, the specifics in terms of the recommendations, staff will be working obviously with HIAC and some other committees about what actually comes to the committee in terms of the actual recommendations. So that's a work in progress, but that's a broad policy work plan umbrella that a lot of things will be coming through that committee regarding this issue.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Deborah. And Councilwoman Roney.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah, for naming that it is very broad. When I looked at our agenda briefing materials, it doesn't speak to the broad amount of work that's happening because it's very narrow in its visibility. And my suggestion was we might simply, like we're doing with the other focus areas, just flesh it out, even if it's in the 5 strategy areas or the recommendation areas, just so folks can kind of track which parts are moving. It's just hopefully we could just take some more credit for the hard work that's happening.
That's a good point. Thank you. Antoinette?
So I have a question now about the committee, and I think, yeah, this will be a good place to discuss. I sent an email earlier in the week and then realized I didn't include you on it, Deborah, so I don't know if you got it or not, but I was out at the neighborhood festival last weekend, and a few people approached me because they were under the impression that the city and county had decided to partner to purchase the orthopedic surgical center by St. Joseph to convert it into a shelter. So I told them that we hadn't had this conversation as a body. Do you have any information on that so that the neighborhood association can quell rumors that are going on?
Sure. Rachel?
Sure. So I'll start with, in addition to us having updates at the committee level, November 16th, we have a joint city-county work session scheduled where we're going to receive updates from city staff, county staff, and then representatives from the different working groups through HIAC. HIAC is our current continuum of care. As you may recall from the, I believe, January 22nd work session that we had, one of the key recommendations is to revise that governance structure. So at the November 16th meeting, we will be receiving updates on all of the 95 recommendations that were included in that report. And one of those recommendations was looking at a multi-service high access shelter option. So we do have a sort of ad hoc working group looking at those shelter options right now. My understanding is that a specific location has not yet been identified, but that is the work that is just now underway. That group is just now forming. And so we should receive updates on where they are and the progress that they're making at that November 16th work session.
So just a heads up, I was going to be able to attend had it been in the afternoon, but now that it's in the morning, I'm not going to make it. So can you get to me as soon as possible, because I'm still getting text messages about it, if that particular location is being considered? So it's the Orthopedic Surgical or Surgery Center at the St. Joseph campus.
We can provide updates on what we know, but right now, no specific location has been determined. So as I mentioned, that group is just now forming. So there have been some sites that have, I think, been discussed as potentials, but no decisions have been made. The funding streams haven't been identified. So this is very much in the early phases in terms of identifying roles, responsibilities, and ultimately the location of where that permanent shelter option would be located. We can give you more specifics when we have them, but we don't have more specifics right now because that group is just now forming.
It would be great if you could let me know, up to now, has that spot been considered, is the question. So I can,
Antoinette, I think somebody's getting discombobulated about the rumors. The rumor is incorrect. That site, I'm not sure what that site is, but I can tell you that that's not been looked at, but there's not any official looking at anything yet. But there is as Rachel mentioned, I mean, there is an initiative to pursue the idea of a high access shelter that serves as a multi-purpose facility. And there's probably going to be lots of locations that are considered. And it's unclear who the purchaser of that facility would be. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the city of Asheville. So there needs to be a collaborative effort to communicate with the community and to, make sure that we're not just sitting here chasing around rumors and people are getting freaked out and squashing every concept before it can even get off the ground. And that's a pretty difficult process. But it's very difficult to continue to reassure, neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood that some property is not being considered. I imagine this will continue to happen until a site is located. But it will have to be discussed and voted on by some public body, either at the very basic level of whether they're going to allocate money for it or even be the purchasing entity. So there'll be an opportunity, for folks to be included in the discussion. So I just worry about, running around and putting out this flame and that flame about, I've never heard that particular facility discussed at all, so I can say that. But this will probably continue to happen, and we'll need to kind of figure out how to handle those communications, those questions and inquiries. And again, we being the city of Asheville are not the lead entity on pursuing this project right now. So that's got to be also a challenge for us. I don't want to thwart the efforts that are being made to look at this concept. I don't know if that's helpful.
It is. I just wanted to know how to respond regarding this specific place because my response was, I don't know anything about it. We haven't discussed it.
Well, and also I think it's important to tell anyone who asks, right now, the city of Asheville is not the initiator of this project and we are not the lead agency on it. So we are only in the sense that we have appointments to HIAC, and HIAC has this ad hoc group that is working on things but hasn't started working on them yet. So I think the tendency is to assume the city's doing anything and all the things, but in this case we are not. But I do imagine that if this is successful, we will be involved in the conversation and at a council level too.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to keep moving. Next slide, Allison, please. So next strategic priority area is neighborhood and climate resilience. And again, you can see the alignment. And in this particular priority area, you have a number of work plan projects. And you can see we have 8 that are identified on the slide. And of course, again, just to back up, these are in a various various places in their process. So as an example, South Slope Vision Plan hopefully is coming to council later in October for a vote. So that's kind of at the end of the policy consideration, whereas we have projects like the Solid Waste Master Plan, which was funded by council in the previous budget process, and that is just getting underway. So as these plans move forward and develop, again, the Environment and Safety and PED council committees will get regular updates from the project managers on these. And just in kind of related to the last conversation, maybe a good example is Pack Square Plaza Vision. While that is a plan that council adopted last month, it is of a nature that it still has implementation efforts associated with it that will likely be back in front of council for further action. So this is one that really doesn't end right now at the policy level with that adoption. There's more policy type decision making and things that need to happen associated with that plan. So any questions on this area? So Councilman Roney, go ahead.
I just wanted to highlight the at the Urban Forestry Commission meeting on Tuesday, there was a presentation from the group about the draft recommendation they're getting ready to bring forward regarding the RFP for the Urban Forestry Master Plan. I'm waiting on the chair to send me a message, and then I'll circulate that to the full council. They are looking at the Knoxville Urban Forestry Master Plan as a potential model. They're a little bit ahead of us on the public engagement side, so it gives us a little bit of on-ramping suggestions.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Councilman Roney. Again, that's another example of where we recently had an update or a discussion around that at the Environment and Safety Council Committee, and I'm sure more to come. So next slide, please, Allison. Reparations, strategic priority area. Again, you can see the alignment on the slide, and example work projects include finalizing reparations commission recommendations, as well as the audit and recommendations to cease further harm. Next slide, please. Reimagining public safety. Again, to repeat myself, you can see the alignment on the slide. Policy work plan projects that are active and associated with that. Priority areas of public safety initiative and community cleanliness. We just discussed, we've got a forthcoming update to council at your next meeting, as well as the ongoing and continued implementation of the community responder program. Next slide, please. And then the last strategic priority area, which tends to have typically the most projects, is just the idea of improving and expanding core services. That's something that really every department in the organization touches this strategic priority in particular. You can see also, if you look at the number of council committee alignment, almost every council committee is connected to these. So there's a number of projects in this priority area. You can see there's actually 10 on this slide. So of our 49 total work plan projects, this strategic priority area represents about 20% of those. And again, all these are in different states of activity or progress, and you'll continue to see these at a number of your council committee meetings. So I'm going to go to the next slide, which is in fact my last slide. And so as I mentioned earlier, there's 23 operational work plan projects, and this slide gives you a representation of those. So these are items that are part of the organizational work plan. Most of the work with these are happening at the staff level. A lot of this is, again, action or direction has been provided by council at the policy level. So our staff and departments are working to really implement and execute and oftentimes operationalize these work plan projects. And the last thing I want to note is, as you can see, there's a tremendous amount of work that's happening at the staff level. And all that is in alignment and support of council strategic priority areas. But I just want to note, and you saw this on one of the slides that Rachel covered, each department also has their own individual work plan. And oftentimes many of those department level projects align with council priorities as well. And just to give a little bit of an example, I looked through the department work plans prior to the meeting today, and you have some that have between 3 and 5 department level work plan items, but there are also some of our larger departments and more complex departments. Some of those on the department work plan have up to 50 items they're working on. So some of these departments can have, between 50 and 60 work plan items that they're trying to work through in any given fiscal year. So there's a tremendous amount of work that's happening, and a lot of it is very intentionally being aligned with council's priority goals. So Allison, if you can go to the next slide, I'll stop there. If there's any questions on what I covered, we can take those now.
Ben, the only thing that I would add is that if you could go back to that previous slide, is when we are looking at allocation of resources, which, we're having challenges in terms of not from a fiscal perspective, but just from a personnel, just having enough people to do all the things that we need to get done. You heard Ben say one department may have 50 things that they are working on. But these things listed here are the organization's priorities, meaning all of us are going to collectively move these items across the finish line by the end of the fiscal year, potentially extending into another year. But again, this is just hopefully representative of the tool that staff and the organization is using for us to manage resources, prioritize resources, align with council and community priorities, and hopefully have a positive impact on the community in terms of enhancing quality of life. So these are not just things that we are thinking up. It is in alignment. It is hopefully going to be things that are impactful, but there are also things that are internal in terms of just building the infrastructure that is needed for us as an organization to become a high performance organization in terms of implementation. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Deborah.
Kim.
Yes, hearing what you're saying, I had some curiosity around the funding that we set aside for the transit master plan with coordinating with the county. And as we get further along into the year, if we don't see a window of opportunity to re-engage in those conversations, I've been brainstorming with folks, what would it look like for us to make an ask? And it would help me to know, because that was meant to be a one-time fund, I imagine that you'd want it to be a one-time fund reallocation, something like piloting the part of the transit safety plan that was brought forward during the ARPA fund that was really highly ranked for feasibility and equity. But it seems like that would be a capacity issue. So I'm curious if we have situations like this, if staff might have some recommendations for where we might reallocate that would improve the expand core services while also working within our capacity. So it might be something like adding routes to the 170 or something like that, S3, S6, something like that. But it would help us, I think, understand if we don't want to get into a time crunch where it's like we have to let this money go really quickly. So the capacity would help.
Excellent question. I'm going to ask Rachel to respond to that because we have given that a lot of thought.
Yes.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. And thank you for those comments, Councilmember Roney. They're spot on. So we are working internally on scope refinement of how do we get the most benefit from those resources, and more importantly, what are the areas within our existing transit plans that we either need further assessment, further refinement to ensure that we've operationalized, we're as efficient as we can be, and that we're looking at the needs across the community. We have a visioning session scheduled later this month with Buncombe County staff to talk about where we have joint goals and where we have identified kind of our unified set of needs so that we can look more holistically at transit needs. Of course, we know several of our transit riders do not live within the city limits. So having that conversation around where do we have shared goals with Buncombe County is really important. And then we plan to bring back, Ben, correct correct me if I'm wrong, later this calendar year to the Planning and Economic Development Committee, some considerations around what that scope of work could be, so that ultimately we can, if we do decide to proceed with a study using that $300,000 that the City Council approved, so that we can get that feedback from PED as well as from the Multimodal Transportation Committee and the Transit Committee on what should that scope entail to make sure that we are getting further refinement and further assessment on those areas of highest need within the individuals who currently use our system and the individuals who have barriers to currently using our system.
Thank you.
As we transition to the next slide, I will note Ben referenced that some departments have 3 projects, some departments have 50 projects. And it's really important that we emphasize when we say project, we're using kind of the project management standard definition of a project, which is a sequence of tasks that must be completed to attain a certain outcome. So when we say projects for the organizational work plan, even for the council committee work plan, that does not include our typical day-to-day delivery of services. So you may see, for example, if the finance department only has 4 or 5 projects, that's not going to include things like processing payroll or conducting our annual audit, which we are statutorily required to do. So just want to note that these are typically something that's new. So payroll being the example, if payroll was to implement a new payroll processing software, which they are not doing, just using that as an example, that would be the project. Processing payroll itself is operationalized and is not something that belongs on the work plan. But if they were to go through a software rollout, that software rollout would be part of the organizational work plan. So in the theme of this continuing to be a work in progress, we do, and Deborah mentioned this earlier, we do want to make sure that we are in open dialogue with council as a full body, as well as council at the committee level on the progress that we're making, and then also having bi-directional conversation with council on, are we focusing on the right things throughout the fiscal year to ultimately achieve those intended outcomes in your strategic priorities and your goal statements. So this is kind of an update on where we are and where we're going. Internally, we have a smart sheet that we use to track and monitor work plan progress. That smart sheet includes individual project milestones. Those milestones go from yellow to red as milestones are approaching their deadline, or if the deadline has been missed. And that's been a really useful tool for the executive team, which includes the city manager's office and then the department directors, for us during our individual check-ins with our assigned departments to talk about why are things behind. Sometimes those things are behind. We'll use the example of the transit master plan because we're having to refine the scope of the project. We did not get the funding that we thought we were going to get from Buncombe County. And so we're having to reassess. So when a project turns red, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we use it as a tool for workload as well as how we look at what we're going to be able to realistically achieve with the remainder of the fiscal year. Externally, and I'm about to show you all this, it's just gone live today, we are launching the Council Priorities webpage, which includes individual status updates on our organizational work plan projects that are aligned to Council strategic priorities and strategic priority goals. So this is being updated and has a live feed to that smart sheet that we've created. And so I'm going to show you that on the next slide, but really excited about, oh, if you can go back to the previous slide, thank you. I'll show you the webpage in just a moment. As you all know, as members of the council's committees, throughout the months of August and September, we had work plan discussions with each of the city council committee. We focused primarily on the items slated for the next 3 to 5 months and intend those council committee work plans to be dynamic, but they do serve as an important tool for how we plan over the next several months, the body of work that the council committee is doing. And then again, to make sure that staff is focusing on the right things as we are going and looking at how do we operationalize that policy direction that we're receiving. October 24th, we are excited to be delivering your second in the last 10 years annual report presentation. So you may recall, I believe it was last December, we gave you your first annual report presentation in a decade. And so we are now in a routine, thanks to the ODAP team, the IT team, as well as the CAPE team for their help on that, of getting in a routine of looking back at the accomplishment that we've had over the course of the last year. Of course, the development of the organizational work plan and the work that the council committees have done on establishing your work plans has made that process much easier. And as we continue to refine the performance measures, that will just continue to be a more robust document. But it's really intended to take a look back at what we were able to achieve over the course of the last year. So you'll hear from the city manager's office on that on October 24th. And then we have a lot of work that's ongoing. So I've already referenced this. We're going to continue to work to refine our performance measures. That includes our output measures, which is just how many potholes did we fill. We're doing a lot of that work with the North Carolina benchmarking project, and we'll have really great comparison data from several cities across the state. And then also looking at those outcome measures. How do we know that we're really having the intended impact on your strategic priorities? And so that's something we're going to be working with departments on throughout the rest of this fiscal year and into the next fiscal year. We also want to provide regular status updates to the council committees, talking about your work plan, and then making sure as we have specific agenda items that we're threading that needle and tying the work that we're doing and the agenda items on the council committee work agendas back to your work plan, just to have that reminder that this is aligned with the work plan and aligned with your strategic priorities. We'll have a series of city managers reports. So we hope to not just have that annual report presentation, but on a quarterly basis, we want to take stock of the progress that we're making with our organizational work plan and council committee work plan projects that are aligned with your strategic priorities. And then we're going to continue working with advisory boards to better align their work and the policy review considerations that they've been assigned with council committee work plans and our organizational work plan. So very much a work in progress, and definitely appreciate feedback you have or ideas that you have on how else we can better communicate the status so that there's an awareness of the body of work that we do have underway that's aligned with your strategic priorities. So next slide. And Allison, you may need to come out of slideshow view to click on the link to pull up the website itself, but I'll just really quickly provide an overview of the website. So Allison, if you can scroll about 3/4 of the way down, a little bit further down. That's perfect. A little bit further up now, I'm sorry. A little bit more up. There we go. So you'll see the top of the website includes your strategic priorities, an overview of your goal statements, and then we've got a section that's entitled Work in Support of Council Priorities. And you have the opportunity to select fiscal year 2022, fiscal year 2023, which is the fiscal year that just ended June 30th, and then fiscal year 2024, which is the fiscal year that we're currently in. Fiscal year 2024 has been selected, but you can go to this website and see high level the status of the work that is underway for the organizational work plan projects that are aligned with that council strategic priority. So we won't go through all of this. This is a step in the direction that we're wanting to head of having more of an interactive dashboard, but this does include live feed data. So you'll be able to see, for example, the affordable housing plan began in fiscal year 2023 due to complete in FY 2024. Again, not where we're ultimately wanting to go, but it does include a high-level scope and a description of what each of these projects are and gives you at least some idea of what the status of those projects will be. So affordable housing plan, we've already had one conversation at the Housing and Community Development Committee level about this project. We have several additional scheduled discussions on either specific tools that are within the affordable housing plan or the work that Enterprise, our consultant, is doing. But just wanted to note that this is available as a resource. I think the question was raised earlier, how do we know about the broader body of work aligned with council strategic priorities? That's really the intent of this website, along with the presentations we'll be making at the committee level, and then to full council, either through future agenda briefings or through city managers' reports at city council meetings. So invite you all to take a look at the website. We definitely appreciate feedback. And again, this is a step on the road towards getting a more interactive dashboard, but we really appreciate the work of the IT Services Department, CAPE, and then our Office of Data and Performance for getting this live for us and at least having this as a start as a useful tool for the community. And now, Allison, if you don't mind, we can hop back to the presentation. And that really is the conclusion of the presentation. So I'll just provide a quick reminder of those key takeaways, if you can get those pulled back up. So your vision is multi-year, aspirational in nature, and it really serves as that guidepost as we deliver services to the community. Your strategic priorities are reviewed each year and are based on a fiscal year and discussed at your annual retreat. City Council for fiscal year 2024, which is the fiscal year we're currently in, added a new element, which is your strategic priority goal statements. And those goal statements have been used in the development of our organizational work plan, our council committee work plan, and then also helping to enhance that alignment with advisory boards back up to the council committees and ultimately to council strategic priorities. So with that, I welcome any feedback, ideas, suggestions you have, and then also please feel free to ask any questions. And you can take down the slides, Katie. I'm sorry, I keep calling you Katie, Allison.
All right, we will take that as a sign of approval and appreciate you, Maggie. Thank you. Appreciate your attention today. And Mayor, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add in terms of closing out the meeting. But otherwise, you'll get your information for the agenda final tomorrow, Maggie, right? Okay.
Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.